Jake Harris stepped off the transport shuttle and took his first breath of recycled station air. It smelled clean, almost too clean, like someone had scrubbed every molecule before letting it touch his lungs. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see the lights embedded in the metal panels. Everything around him was white and silver and blue, designed for creatures who preferred calm spaces and soft edges. He was the only human on Volantis Prime. The space station hung in orbit around a gas giant 300 light-years from Earth. It housed the Galactic Academy, a school where the brightest students from dozens of species came to learn together. For 400 years, the Academy had accepted students from across the Concord, but they had never accepted a human before. Earth was too new to the galactic community. Too strange. Too dangerous. Jake adjusted the strap of his bag and walked toward the registration hall. He noticed the stairs immediately. A group of Valorians stood near the entrance, their pale blue skin almost glowing under the station lights. They had 4 eyes each, and all of those eyes were fixed on him. One of them whispered something to the others. Jake caught the word Deathworld before they turned away. He was used to that word by now. Earth had been classified as a Category 7 Deathworld by the Galactic Concord. That meant extreme gravity, deadly predators, toxic atmosphere, and constant natural disasters. Most species in the galaxy evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates and few threats. They could not imagine living on a planet that actively tried to kill its inhabitants every single day. Jake found the registration desk and smiled at the small, furry creature behind the counter. The creature flinched at the sight of his teeth. "Sorry," Jake said quickly. "I forgot. Showing teeth is a threat display for some species, right?" The creature relaxed slightly. "You are the human." "That's me. Jake Harris, exchange student from Earth." The creature handed him a thin tablet and pointed toward a hallway. "Counselor Meredith will process your arrival. 3rd door on the left." Jake thanked him and walked down the hallway. The floor was soft beneath his boots, designed for species with sensitive feet. The gravity felt light, maybe 70% of what he was used to back home. He would have to be careful not to jump too high or walk too fast. He did not want to scare anyone. Counselor Maritha's office was warm and filled with strange plants that pulsed with soft light. Meredith herself stood nearly 7 feet tall, with willowy limbs and pale blue skin like the other Valorians. Her 4 eyes blinked at different times as she studied Jake from behind her desk. "Please sit," she said. Her voice was musical, almost like singing. Jake sat in a chair that was slightly too large for him. He felt like a child visiting the principal's office. Meredith opened a file on her screen and frowned. "Your medical records are unusual. Is something wrong?" "I am not certain how to interpret them." She turned the screen so Jake could see it. "According to this, your immune system is currently fighting approximately 2,000 different pathogens. Is this an error?" Jake shrugged. "That sounds about right. Humans carry a lot of bacteria and viruses. Most of them are harmless. Some of them actually help us." Meredith's 4 eyes widened. "You carry diseases inside your body willingly?" "We don't really have a choice. That's just how Earth works." She scrolled down the file, and her expression grew more troubled. "Your bone density is 3 times higher than Valorian standard. Your muscle mass suggests you could lift objects weighing several hundred kilograms. And your healing rate." She paused and looked at him directly. "You can regrow damaged tissue without medical intervention?" "Small stuff, yeah. Cuts and bruises heal on their own. Broken bones take a few weeks." "Weeks," Meredith repeated softly. "A broken bone would end my life." Jake did not know what to say to that. He had broken his arm once, falling off his bike when he was 12. His mother had driven him to the hospital. They put a cast on it, and 6 weeks later, he was fine. It had never occurred to him that other species might not work the same way. Mirith closed the file and folded her hands on the desk. I must be honest with you, Jake. Many students and faculty are nervous about your presence here. Humans have a reputation in the Concord. What kind of reputation? You are seen as resilient, dangerously so. Your species evolved on a world that should have killed you many times over. The fact that you not only survived but thrived is difficult for others to understand. Jake nodded slowly. I get it. I'll try to keep a low profile. His first class was survival theory with Professor Yelindra. The classroom was circular, with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central platform. Jake found a spot near the back and tried to make himself small. It did not work. Every student in the room turned to look at him when he entered. Professor Yelindra was a Scythian, an ancient species with 6 legs and a shell-like body covered in intricate patterns. She moved slowly to the center of the platform and began the lecture without introduction. Today we will discuss emergency response protocols, she said. Imagine you are stranded in an unfamiliar environment. You have sustained an injury. What do? A Corvani student raised one of his 3 arms. Signal for rescue immediately. Correct. And if rescue is delayed? The students murmured among themselves. No one seemed to have an answer. Jake raised his hand without thinking. You stabilize the injury and find shelter. Conserve energy, locate water, wait it out. Every eye in the room turned to him. Professor Yelindra's antennae twitched with interest. You speak from experience? Sort of. I broke my arm hiking when I was 16. Tripped on a rock and fell wrong. The trail was pretty remote, so I splinted it myself and walked back to the trailhead. Took about 6 miles. Silence filled the classroom. Professor Yelindra's 6 legs clicked against the platform. You walked 6 miles with a broken limb? I didn't have much choice. No signal from my phone out there. A Corvani student named Drex laughed from the front row. His thick gray hide rippled with amusement. The human is exaggerating. No creature could endure such a thing. Jake shrugged. I mean, it hurt pretty bad. But you do what you have to do. Before Drex could respond, an alarm shrieked through the station. Red lights flashed along the walls. A calm voice announced over the speakers that a micrometeorite had breached. The hall in Sector 12. Jake's dormitory was in Sector 12. He was already moving toward the door, before anyone else had even stood up. Jake ran through the corridors while everyone else stood frozen. The alarm was still screaming overhead, and the red lights made everything look like it was covered in blood. He could feel the air pressure changing as he got closer to Sector 12. His ears popped twice before he reached the dormitory wing. The hallway was chaos. Students were stumbling over each other, trying to find the emergency shelters. Some of them had already collapsed on the floor. Their bodies were not built for sudden pressure changes or temperature drops. Jake saw a Valorian girl lying against the wall, her blue skin turning pale as her body went into shock. 2 Corvani students were crawling toward a sealed door that would not open. And there, right in the middle of the hallway, was Drex, the same student who had laughed at him in class just minutes ago. He was unconscious, his 3 arms splayed out at awkward angles. His gray hide was already starting to lose color. Jake did not hesitate. He grabbed Drex under the arms and started dragging him toward the nearest emergency shelter. The lighter gravity helped. Drex weighed maybe 100 kilos, but it felt like lifting a heavy suitcase back on Earth. Jake could handle that. Come on, he muttered. Stay with me. He reached the shelter door and slammed his palm against the access panel. The door hissed open, revealing a small room with emergency supplies and oxygen masks. Jake pulled Drex inside and went back for the others. The Valorian girl was next. She was lighter than Drex, almost fragile in his arms. Her 4 eyes fluttered open for a moment, and she looked at him with pure terror before passing out again. Jake carried her to the shelter and laid her down gently next to Drex. 3 more students. He found them huddled together near a sealed bulkhead, too weak to move. Their species were warm-blooded, but their bodies could not regulate temperature the way humans could. The air in the corridor had dropped to near freezing, and it was getting colder by the second. Jake's breath came out in white clouds. His fingers were starting to sting. He had felt colder than this during winter camping trips back in Oklahoma, but he knew the temperature would keep dropping until someone sealed the breach. He carried 2 students at once, one under each arm, and practically threw them into the shelter. Then he went back for the last one, a small creature with soft fur and wide, frightened eyes. "It's okay," Jake said. "I've got you." He delivered the last student to the shelter and did a quick count. 6 survivors, including himself. The shelter had oxygen for 12, so they would be fine for now. But the breach was still open. If no one sealed it, the entire sector would decompress within minutes. Jake looked at the control panel on the wall. Emergency bulkhead controls. Manual override. He had seen diagrams of these systems during his orientation tour. The station designers had assumed that anyone using manual controls would be wearing a protective suit. Jake was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He stepped out of the shelter and sealed the door behind him. The cold hit him like a wall. His skin tightened, and he could feel ice forming on his eyebrows. Every breath burned his lungs. But he was still standing. He was still moving. The manual override was 50 meters down the corridor. Jake walked toward it, one step at a time. His body started shivering, and he welcomed it. Shivering was good. Shivering meant his muscles were generating heat to keep his core temperature stable. It was a survival mechanism that most species in the galaxy did not have. He reached the override panel and grabbed the lever with both hands. The metal was so cold that it burned. He could feel the skin on his palms sticking to the surface. This was going to hurt. He pulled. The lever resisted at first, frozen in place. Jake braced his feet against the floor and pulled harder. His muscles strained. His shoulders ached. But he had spent his whole life on a planet with heavier gravity than this. His bones were denser, his tendons were stronger, and his will was iron. The lever moved. Slowly at first, then all at once. A massive bulkhead slammed down at the end of the corridor, sealing off the breach. The pressure stabilized. The temperature stopped dropping. Jake let go of the lever and looked at his hands. The skin was red and raw, already starting to blister where it had touched the frozen metal. He would need medical attention, but he would live. He had survived worse. He walked back to the emergency shelter and opened the door. The 6 students inside stared at him like he was a ghost. Drex was awake now, sitting up with a confused expression on his gray face. "What happened?" Drex asked. "Hull breach," Jake said. "I sealed it. You sealed it? By yourself? In that temperature?" Jake sat down against the wall and closed his eyes. "Yeah, it wasn't that bad." Drex looked at the other students. None of them could believe what they were seeing. The human was covered in frost. His hands were burned from the cold. He should have been dead 3 times over. And he was sitting there like nothing had happened. Like sealing a hull breach in sub-zero temperatures was just another Tuesday. The rescue team arrived 20 minutes later. Commander Torvax led them personally, a tall Corvani with dark gray hide and a stern expression. He had been head of station security for 15 years, and he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. The rescue team found Jake sitting calmly among the survivors, drinking water from an emergency canteen and checking on the other students. His hands were wrapped in bandages from the first aid kit. He looked tired but stable. "You are the human," Torvax said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir." You sealed the emergency bulkhead manually, in freezing conditions, without protective equipment. Jake shrugged. Someone had to do it. ToRVX stared at him for a long moment. He had read reports about Earth humans. He had dismissed most of them as exaggeration or propaganda. Now he was not so sure. How are you still alive? ToRVX asked. Jake thought about the question. Back home, people survived worse things all the time. Farmers worked through blizzards. Firefighters walked into burning buildings. Rescue workers dug through rubble for days without rest. Humans did impossible things every day because they had no choice. That was just life on Earth. I guess I'm stubborn, Jake finally said. ToRVX nodded slowly. He did not understand, but he respected what he saw. The human had saved 5 lives today with nothing but his bare hands and his refusal to give up. I will need to review the security footage, ToRVX said. And I will need your full file from Earth. Sure, whatever you need. ToRVX turned to leave, then stopped at the door. The Concorde has files on your planet, Deathworld, Category 7. I always thought those classifications were exaggerated. Jake smiled, careful not to show too many teeth. They're not. ToRVX walked away without another word. He had a lot of reading to do. Behind him, Drex helped Jake to his feet. The big Kervani looked at the human with new eyes. He remembered laughing at Jake in class, calling him an exaggerator, dismissing him as nothing special. He would never make that mistake again. Commander ToRVX sat in his office and stared at the screen in front of him. The file from Earth had arrived that morning, transmitted across 300 light years by quantum relay. It contained everything the Galactic Concorde knew about Jake Harris, human exchange student age 22. ToRVX had been reading for 3 hours. He still could not believe what he was seeing. The file started with basic information. Jake was born in a region called Oklahoma, located in the middle of a large continent. The climate data alone was terrifying. Temperatures could range from 40 degrees below freezing to over 40 degrees above in a single year. The region experienced violent rotating storms called tornadoes that could destroy entire settlements in minutes. Venomous animals lived in the grass. Poisonous plants grew along the trails. And the people who lived there considered it normal. Jake had grown up camping in the wilderness. He learned to build fires from sticks and rocks before he was 10 years old. He could purify water using nothing but heat and fabric. He knew how to find north by looking at the stars. His species passed down survival knowledge like other species passed down art or music. The file mentioned an incident when Jake was 16 years old. He had been traveling in a vehicle called a car when another vehicle struck him at high speed. The impact crushed the frame around him, trapping him with a broken leg. He remained conscious for 4 hours, alone in the wreckage, until emergency services arrived. 4 hours. With a broken bone, conscious and alert, ToRVX closed the file and rubbed his eyes. He had commanded security forces for 15 years. He had faced pirates, raiders, and natural disasters. But he had never encountered anything like this. The human was not special by Earth standards. He was average, ordinary. And that was the most frightening part. If Jake Harris was ordinary, what were the exceptional humans like? Across the station, Counselor Mirith was having a similar conversation with Jake himself. They sat in her warm office, surrounded by those pulsing plants, and she asked him questions that she had never asked any student before. "Tell me about your childhood," Mirith said. Jake shifted in his seat. "Pretty normal, I guess. Grew up on a farm outside Tulsa. Helped my parents with the animals, went to school, played sports. The usual stuff. What kind of animals did your family raise?" "Cattle mostly. Some chickens. We had a dog named Buster who lived to be 14. Mirith made a note on her tablet. And your education included survival training? Not officially, but we had fire drills every month at school. Tornado drills too. And my dad took me camping a lot when I was young. He taught me how to take care of myself in the woods. This camping, what did it involve? Jake thought for a moment. We would hike into the wilderness with just our backpacks. Set up a tent, make a fire, cook our food over the flames. Sometimes we would fish in the streams or hunt small animals. My dad showed me how to read animal tracks and avoid dangerous plants. Meredith's 4 eyes blinked slowly. You were taught to hunt as a child? Sure. Most kids where I grew up learned to shoot by the time they were 12. It's a useful skill. Shoot? As in projectile weapons? Yeah, rifles and shotguns mostly. For hunting deer and birds. Sometimes for protection against wild animals. We had coyotes and mountain lions in the area. Meredith set down her tablet. She needed a moment to process what she was hearing. On her world, violence was rare and deeply taboo. The idea of teaching children to use weapons was horrifying. But Jake spoke about it like it was perfectly normal, like learning to read or write. Jake, she said carefully, do you understand why other species find humans unsettling? He nodded. I think so. We come from a hard place, and it made us hard too. But that doesn't mean we're dangerous. Not to people who aren't trying to hurt us. The students you saved yesterday. You risked your life for them without hesitation. Why? Jake considered the question. It seemed strange to him, like asking why water was wet. They needed help, he finally said. What else was I supposed to do? Later that afternoon, Professor Yelindra invited Jake to guest lecture in her survival theory class. The room was packed. Word had spread about what happened in Sector 12. And every student wanted to see the human who had walked through freezing temperatures with his bare hands. Jake stood at the center of the platform and felt everyone watching him. He had never been good at public speaking, but he would try his best. So, he began. Professor Yelindra asked me to talk about practical survival skills. I guess I should start with the basics. He pulled out a small kit from his pocket and opened it to show the contents. Bandages, antiseptic, tape, a small knife, and some cord. This is a first aid kit. Every human carries something like this, or at least we're supposed to. The idea is that if you get hurt, you can stabilize yourself until help arrives. A Valorian student raised her hand. What kind of injuries can you stabilize? Most things. Cuts, burns, broken bones, puncture wounds. My dad taught me how to set a broken bone when I was 14. You find 2 straight sticks, put them on either side of the break, and wrap them tight with cloth or tape. It hurts like crazy, but it keeps the bone from moving around and causing more damage. The students stared at him in horror. You set your own broken bones? Someone asked. Only if there's no other option. But yeah, humans can do that. We can also stitch our own wounds closed if we have a needle and thread. I've never had to do that personally, but my grandmother did it once when she cut herself on a farm tool. Professor Yelindra's antennae were twitching rapidly. She had studied survival theory for 60 years, but she had never heard anything like this. After the lecture, Drex approached Jake in the hallway. The big Corvani looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to another and avoiding eye contact. I wanted to apologize, Drex said, for what I said in class before the breach. I called you an exaggerator. I mocked your planet. Jake waved it off. Don't worry about it. You didn't know. That is not an excuse. You saved my life yesterday. You carried me to safety when I could not even stand. I owe you a debt. You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do. Drax shook his head. No, that is what a human would do. My people would have saved themselves first. We are not taught to sacrifice for strangers. Jake thought about that. Maybe Drex was right. Maybe humans were different. But he did not feel special or heroic. He just felt like himself. "Tell you what," Jake said. "How about we start over? I'm Jake." He held out his hand. Drex looked at it for a moment, then reached out with one of his 3 arms and gripped it firmly. "I am Drex, and I am honored to know you." They shook hands, and something shifted between them. They were not just classmates anymore. They were becoming friends. Then the station's warning system activated again. But this time, it was not an accident. The sensors had detected an unknown vessel approaching fast, and it was not responding to any hails. Something bad was coming. The Kreth Raiders hit the station at 3 points simultaneously. They came in fast assault pods, punching through the outer hull like knives through paper. Their ships were built for speed and violence, and their crews were built the same way. Jake heard the explosions from his dormitory room. The wall shook, the lights flickered, and then the emergency announcement started. Hostile boarding action. All students shelter in place. Concord military response estimated at 6 hours. 6 hours. That was a long time to hide. Jake grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He could hear screaming in the distance, the sound of Angie weapons discharging, and the heavy thud of armored boots. The Kreth were already inside. Drex was waiting in the hallway, his gray hide pale with fear. His 3 arms trembled at his sides, but he stood his ground when he saw Jake. "What are you doing?" Drex asked. "We are supposed to shelter. I'm not going to sit here and wait for them to find us. That is insane. The Kreth are raiders. They are violent and well-armed. We are students." Jake looked at his friend. He understood the fear. It made perfect sense. Any rational creature would hide and wait for rescue. But something in Jake's chest refused to accept that option. Something old and deep, buried in his DNA by millions of years of evolution on a planet that never stopped trying to kill his ancestors. Humans did not hide when others were in danger. They fought. "You can stay here if you want," Jake said. "I won't think less of you. But I'm going to see if I can help." He started walking toward the sounds of combat. After 3 steps, he heard heavy footsteps behind him. Drex had followed. "I cannot let you go alone," Drex said. "You saved my life. I will not abandon you now." Jake smiled, careful not to show too many teeth. "Thanks, Drex. Stay behind me and stay quiet." They moved through the corridors like ghosts. Jake had memorized the station layout during his first week, a habit from growing up in tornado country where knowing your exits could save your life. He led Drex through maintenance tunnels and service passages, avoiding the main hallways where the Kreth patrols were moving. They found the first group of captured students in a storage bay near the engineering section. 7 of them, hands bound behind their backs, guarded by 2 Kreth soldiers. The Kreth were tall and lean, with dark scales and sharp claws. They carried energy rifles that could burn through metal at close range. Jake studied the situation from behind, a stack of cargo containers. The guards were confident, almost bored. They did not expect resistance. They had done this many times before on other stations, and the prey always cooperated. "Wait here," Jake whispered to Drex. "I'll circle around and come from the other side. When you see me move, make some noise to distract them." "What kind of noise?" "Anything. Just give me 2 seconds." Jake slipped away before Drex could argue. He moved through the shadows, using the cargo containers as cover, working his way around to the far side of the storage bay. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. This was not so different from hunting back home. Different prey, different stakes, but the same basic principles. He found a heavy metal rod on the floor, probably a piece of damaged equipment. It was about the length of a baseball bat and solid enough to do real damage. He picked it up and got into position. Vendrax knocked over a stack of containers on the other side of the bay. The Kreth guards spun toward the sound, raising their rifles. In that moment, Jake moved. He covered the distance in 3 long strides, swinging the metal rod with all the strength his earth-heavy bones could generate. The first guard went down without a sound. Jake hit him in the side of the head, and the scales cracked like pottery. The second guard turned just in time to take the rod across his weapon arm. His rifle clattered to the floor, and Jake hit him again before he could recover. 2 guards. 4 seconds. Both unconscious. Jake stood over them, breathing hard, the metal rod still in his hands. The captured students stared at him with a mixture of terror and awe. They had never seen anyone move like that. They had never seen anyone fight like that. Drex emerged from behind the containers, his 4 eyes wide. You defeated them both with a metal stick. Get their weapons, Jake said, and untie the students. We need to move. They freed the captives and armed themselves with the fallen rifles. Jake did not know how to use Kreth energy weapons, but he could figure it out. Point and shoot. That was universal. The group made their way toward the communication array at the center of the station. Jake knew the Kreth would be jamming all signals to prevent calls for help. If he could reach the array, maybe he could find a way to punch through the interference and send a distress call. They encountered 3 more Kreth patrols on the way. Each time, Jake led the attack. He used the maintenance tunnels to flank them, the lower gravity to move faster than they expected, and his sheer refusal to stop fighting even when the odds were against him. By the time they reached the communication array, Jake had a cut on his forehead that would not stop bleeding and bruises across his ribs that made every breath hurt. But he was still standing. He was still moving. The array was guarded by 5 Kreth soldiers and their leader, a massive creature with black scales and golden eyes. He wore ceremonial armor covered in trophies from past raids. He looked at Jake like he was looking at an insect. A human, the leader said. I have heard stories about your kind. They say you are hard to kill. Jake gripped his metal rod. The energy rifle had run out of charge 2 corridors back. He was down to primitive weapons and stubbornness. Only one way to find out, Jake said. The leader laughed and drew a curved blade from his belt. He gestured to his soldiers to stand back. This kill, he wanted for himself. They circled each other in the center of the array room. The Kreth leader was taller, stronger, and armed with a real weapon. Jake was bleeding, exhausted, and armed with a piece of scrap metal. By every reasonable measure, he should have already lost. But Jake did not believe in reasonable measures. The leader struck first, a sweeping cut that would have opened Jake from shoulder to hip. Jake dodged left, feeling the blade pass inches from his skin. He countered with a swing at the leader's knee, but the Kreth blocked it with his armored forearm. They traded blows for what felt like hours. Jake took hits that would have killed most species. A cut across his arm. A strike to his ribs that cracked something inside. A slash that opened his shoulder to the bone. But he did not fall. He did not stop. Every time the leader knocked him down, he got back up. The Kreth leader began to slow. Not from injury, but from confusion. He had fought many enemies across many worlds. They all broke eventually. They all gave up. But this human refused to break. This human kept coming back for more, again and again. Like death itself could not hold him. Jake saw the opening. One moment of hesitation, one instant of doubt. He stepped inside the leader's guard and swung the metal rod with everything he had left. The crack echoed through the room. The leader stumbled backward, his blade falling from numb fingers. He looked at Jake with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. What are you? The leader whispered. Jake was covered in blood, some of it his own and some of it not. His vision was starting to blur at the edges. but he stood tall and met the leader's golden eyes. "I'm human," he said, "and this is what we do." The Kreth soldiers grabbed their fallen leader and ran. They had come to raid a soft target, an easy conquest. They had not expected this. They had not expected him. Jake collapsed against the communication console and managed to send a distress signal before everything went black. Jake woke up in the medical bay with tubes in his arms and machines beeping softly beside his bed. The ceiling above him was white and clean, just like everything else on the station. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the pain reminded him. His entire body ached. His ribs screamed when he tried to breathe. His shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, and his arm felt like it belonged to someone else. But he was alive. That counted for something. Counselor Mirith appeared at his bedside, her 4 eyes filled with an emotion Jake could not quite read. Relief, maybe, or amazement. "You have been unconscious for 16 hours, she said. "The doctors did not believe you would survive your injuries. They have never treated a human before. They did not know what your body could endure." Jake tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "What happened to the Kreth?" "They fled when the Concorde fleet arrived. Your distress signal reached them in time. Without it, we would have been lost. And the students? The ones we rescued? All safe. 47 people owe their lives to you and Drex." Jake closed his eyes and let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. 47. That was a good number. That made the pain worth it. Over the next few days, Jake recovered faster than the doctors thought possible. His cuts closed. His bruises faded. His cracked ribs began to knit themselves back together. The medical staff watched him with a mixture of fascination and disbelief, taking notes and running tests that they would study for years to come. The Galactic Concorde sent investigators to interview everyone involved in the incident. They wanted to understand how one human student had disrupted an entire raider operation. The reports they gathered painted a picture that seemed impossible. A young man from a deadly planet who refused to surrender, refused to hide, refused to die. Commander Torvex visited Jake in the medical bay on the 3rd day. The security chief stood at attention beside the bed, his gray hide gleaming under the lights. "The Concorde has reviewed the footage from the attack," Torvex said. "They have watched you fight. They have seen what you did." Jake waited for him to continue. "I have commanded security forces for 15 years. I have trained soldiers from a dozen species. I have never seen anything like you. Not your strength, though that was impressive, but your will. You were beaten, bleeding, and broken, and you still would not stop." Why? Jake thought about the question. It was the same one Mirith had asked him after the hull breach. Why did he risk himself for strangers? Why did he keep fighting when every rational part of his brain told him to give up? "Where I come from," Jake said slowly, "people help each other. That's how we survive. Our planet tried to kill us every single day, so we learned to stick together. When someone needs help, you help them. When someone is in danger, you protect them. That's just what we do." Torvex nodded slowly. "Your species is remarkable. And terrifying. We're not that scary. We just come from a scary place." The next week, Professor Yalindra called a full academy assembly in the Great Hall. Every student and faculty member was required to attend. Jake sat in the front row, still bandaged and sore, with Drex at his side. Yalindra moved to the center of the stage, her 6 legs clicking against the polished floor. She looked down at the assembled crowd with eyes that had seen centuries pass. "We are here to discuss what happened during the Kreth attack," she began, "and to address a truth that many of you have been avoiding. Our galaxy is not as safe as we pretend. There are dangers out there that we are not prepared to face. We have grown comfortable in our peaceful worlds, and that comfort has made us weak." The hall was silent. No one dared to speak. But there is hope, because there are species who did not have the luxury of comfort. Species who evolved on worlds that challenged them every moment of every day. They learned to fight, to endure, to never give up. And one of them is sitting among us now. Every eye turned to Jake. He felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. Jake Harris comes from a Deathworld, Yolindra continued. His planet should have destroyed his kind long ago. Instead, it made them into something extraordinary. Not because they are stronger or faster than us, though they are, but because they refuse to accept defeat. They refuse to abandon those who need them. They have a word for this quality. They call it heart. Drax stood up from his seat. His voice carried across the hall, clear and strong. I want to speak. Jake Harris saved my life twice. First during the hull breach, when he carried me to safety through freezing temperatures. Then during the attack, when he fought enemies who should have killed him. Both times, he had every reason to save himself instead. Both times, he chose to help others. Drax turned to face Jake directly. My people have a word for someone who risks everything for another. We call them brother. And that is what Jake is to me. My brother. The hall erupted in applause. Species who had feared humans, who had whispered about deathworlds and dangerous predators, were now standing and cheering for the young man who had proven them wrong. After the assembly, Councilor Mirith found Jake in the corridor. She had a proposal for him. The Concord wants to offer you a permanent position at the academy, she said. Not as a student, but as an instructor. You would teach survival skills, emergency response, and crisis management. We need to learn from species like yours if we are going to face the threats ahead. Jake considered the offer. He had come here to study xenobiology, to learn about alien life. He had never expected to become a teacher. I'll do it on one condition, he said. I want to bring more humans to the station. There are billions of us back on Earth, and we're not all as gentle as me. If the Concord wants to learn from Deathworld species, they should get used to having us around. Mirith smiled. A gesture she had learned from watching Jake. I think that can be arranged. That evening, Jake stood on the observation deck and watched the stars spin slowly past the windows. The station was quiet now. The raiders were gone, the wounds were healing, and life was returning to normal. Drax joined him at the window. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two people from very different worlds who had become friends through fire and blood. I got a message from home, Jake said. My little sister wants to apply to the academy next year. She heard about what happened, and now she wants to come see the galaxy for herself. Is she like you? Jake laughed. She's worse. Back home, she was captain of the wrestling team and volunteer firefighter during the summer. She makes me look lazy. Drax made a sound that might have been a groan. One human was difficult enough. Now, there will be two. Eventually, there will be millions. We're just getting started out here, Drax. The galaxy has no idea what's coming. They watched the stars together until the station's lights dimmed for the night cycle. Somewhere out in that vast darkness, Earth was spinning on its axis. Home to billions of humans who had never stopped fighting for their survival. And now those humans were looking up at the stars, wondering what came next. The galaxy had always thought it was dangerous, but it had never met humanity before. It had never faced a species forged by earthquakes and hurricanes, by predators and plagues, by a planet that threw everything it had at them and still could not break their spirit. Earth children did not learn to hide. They learned to stand back up, and they were just getting started.